In World of Warcraft, we're trying to convince you that Azeroth is a real place. Good sound design at WoW, we want things to feel organic, we want things to feel believable. We have to kind of fill in all those blanks because by default, everything's just completely silent. Ambience is always one of the coolest things for us to work on. The zones in The War Within, the sound team really knocked it out of the park. They're lush, they're vibrant, they pull you in and they kind of reinforce what these places are all about, whether they're friendly or hostile, familiar or unfamiliar. Early on, we want to understand what the intent behind what designers and artists are doing. We want to understand why they made those things so that we can match with sound. So we pick up where they leave off and we fill in the blanks, we fill in any of the sounds that are missing, we define what that zone sounds like or what that creature sounds like, and if there's emotional intent or if there's gameplay mechanics, we want to make sure that sound is right there reinforcing all those things.
Azj-Kahet is the home of the Nerubian Empire. It's an all-underground biome. I think an important thing to delineate is that while the Nerubians are scary humanoid spiders, they have culture, they have commerce, they are just a fully functioning society. So the overworld, it's bustling. And then the underground portions are corrupted by black blood. So there's kind of two very distinct vibes. The beginning of my sound design process, we try to meet up with world building, or as a team, we will fly through the zone together, just kind of to get an overall feel for it. When they said we need this to feel dark, you're underground, it's hostile, there's crazy old god influence underneath, in my mind, this is going to take a lot of synthesis. That's kind of what I gravitate towards. I wanted to synthesize winds just to make it feel detached from our reality. So I synthesized these on my Moog, going through some reverb, some delay, and some panning. So to contrast that, I really wanted something organic to be the bed. I got our producer Brecken, we got some mics in the Foley room, and we just started hitting anything we could, bowing anything we could, and then we ended up finding these massive springs. The combination of that led to this really incredible, rumbly but screechy quality from the giant springs in the bow. I processed it to the point where you would never know it's a spring. It has an organic quality to it because it's air moving, it's a thing vibrating. So I thought that served as a really proper, this is the base ambience of the zone. And then I can populate it with all this crazy synthesized stuff. The trope of a scary thing is the knife sound we all know, the really pitched, high frequency. That's the jump scare, is the big top end. We didn't want it to feel so punishing that you have a daily quest in Azj-Kahet and you're I can't, it's the morning. I can't be hearing that. Box with contact mics, bowed, building out a lot of the texture of kind of the sounds that surround you as you're flying through Azj-Kahet. I always go in with some intention of I want this sort of texture, or I want this sort of frequency range, and then you just reach for what's around you. It's going in with intention and letting the creativity just take over.
Yeah, we get to play around with when do we want things to be grounded and feel Earth-like, and when do we want them to be abstract and weird. And that's actually one of the big tools we use when we're setting up ambience. Do we want this to feel familiar and safe? Then we're going to lean on using sounds from Earth, right? So we use birds that are recognizable birds, wind sounds, things that you already know are real. That helps communicate familiarity, and familiarity matches safety. As we progress into the depths in the War Within zones, things get more hostile, things get more unfamiliar. And so we lean away from using literal earth sounds, and we lean in on more maybe synthesized things, or taking real sounds but manipulating them enough that you don't quite know what you're hearing.
Hallowfall is the biggest zone in the expansion. It's got a giant crystal, and the crystal actually has two phases. It will go from light into dark or void, and the ambience will shift to convey both of those feelings. When I first saw Hallowfall, the whole area is basically very alien. So I kind of look at it and think of ideas, what comes to mind. Since it's so alien, I went outside the box and thought about utilizing guitar and tonal things like crystals to create new sounds to supplement things like wind. I wanted to use the guitar, and I didn't want it to sound musical. I wanted to use it just to create like broad swaths of ambience that moves and shifts, so it feels like a space, but when you hear it, you're not like, that's a guitar. And I just go from there, create a bunch of source, and then take that source and process it through usually a lot of granular synthesis, different plugins. And I get to pick and choose from those building blocks into creating the end result. And then filtered it. And reverb. Granular synthesis chops up the waveforms into grains and will replay them back in different orders, creating a new sound. When I first try a sound out, it's 100%, I don't know what I'm going to get. So I have an idea, an end goal, but it's basically throwing stuff at the wall until you find what sticks. And then some of the stuff that you think will never work ends up being the best.
You know, my team is always looking for opportunities to do things that are new, novel, maybe new ways to use our existing tools, or maybe we need new tools to try out new ideas for sound. We're always trying to find ways to make sure that the environments are as dynamic as they can be, and that's always an ongoing process. So back at WoW's launch, just due to technical limitations, you really just have a simple stereo loop. Today we have dozens of sound emitters all around you. There's positional stuff happening everywhere you are that I think helps reinforce how real and grounded all these sounds are. They're not just a file that's playing, it's a soundscape that you're a part of.
I think what makes good sound design at the very base level is serving, in our case, our players. Even before creating a sound, I'm always thinking about like, how is this going to make our player base feel, and is it going to make Azeroth feel like home? Obviously every zone is very, very different and needs its own flavor of that, but I think immersion is number one.
I think what makes good sound design to have the players feel the emotions that you're intending. If you can make them feel what you want them to feel, I think you've succeeded. And also creating a sense of wonder. Oh, what's that? I've never heard that before.
I think the sound team did a really solid job on ambience across the board for the War Within. I think each zone has really unique vibes, and I think if you just spend some time just listening to the sounds that are in each of these places, I think you can really tell the progression from relative safety up above down into some pretty scary stuff down in the depths. I'm really proud of what the sound team came up with there. I think it's worth listening to if you haven't.